I'm doing a book review on Our Greatest Gift, A Mediation of Dying and Death by Henri Nouwen. The book is broken up into two parts. The first part is about dying. Well, the second part is about caring for the dying and how we should do that and steps to do that. In the first part, it starts out by Henri talking about how he had turned 60 and they had a party for him, and his friend was giving a toast and he was trying to think of things to say about Henri. The only thing he could think to say was, "You're an old man now." And Henri said that he didn't think of himself as an old person, and that being an old man means being close to death, and he did not feel old. And the main question that evolves from this book is, how do we prepare ourselves for our death? One of the first steps is to become a child again. And Jesus said, unless you change and become like little children, you'll never enter the kingdom of heaven. And pretty much it's not saying you should act like a little toddler and throw tantrums and stuff, but it relates to the fact that from the time you're born to the time you die, life is lived from dependence to dependence, because when you're a little child, you depend on your parent or a guardian to care for you and make sure you have all your things, make sure they feed you and all that. And then in your midlife, you're able to depend on yourself for the most part, for most people. And then when you're dying, you're depending on somebody again to give you medicines and care for you. And a lot of times our fear of death will take over our freedom. And we just have to have faith in ourselves and in God. And if we have faith, then we won't have fear. And if there's fear, then death can't take over our freedom, and that can't rule our life. And the book also talks about brother and sisterhood and how that is a sign of joy, because as humans, we like being the same and belonging to one human family, and that can lead to a good death. And Henri says that there's a hidden gift in dying, and that gift is the gift of unity with all people. So the way I interpret that is that, me personally, I believe that there is a heaven and a hell, and I believe that if you live a good godly life and you are saved and everything like that, you'll go to heaven and you'll reunite with others who are there. And that's how I interpret that. Henri states you're born powerless and you die powerless, and to prepare for a good death, you must develop this stronger sense of solidarity. And I really enjoyed the part in the book, in part 1, where he says that death can be a celebration of unity with the human race instead of looking at it as it's separating us from people. Because if you believe in heaven and stuff, that's probably how your perspective of that is that it's a reunion instead of you being separated. And it talks about how Jesus knew the sadness and sorrow that his death was going to bring to the people. But he announced his death like it was full of blessing and promise and hope. And that's how Jesus is remembered. He's remembered for being brave like that, for putting others before him. He literally died on a cross for us. And that's how we remember him. And basically, we should live how we would want people to remember us. And if we live like that, it'll be passed on to our next generations of our family and stuff, because that's how they're going to remember us, and that's how they're going to want to live their life. Part 2 talks about how we should care for those who are in the dying process, and to care for others as they're becoming weaker and closer to death. we should allow them to fulfill their deepest wish, and that's to be daughters and sons of God. And really, to do this, we need to tell them they are, to communicate with them and tell them that they are daughters and sons of God. And we can do this by words, prayers, touching them, holding their hands, just small acts like that. We also need to help the dying overcome self-rejection, because a lot of them fear that they're not loved. And when we care for them, we don't need to care for them by ourselves. In the book it says it is a community of care that reminds the dying person of his or her belovedness. And I really believe that, because when my grandfather was dying of cancer, the churches would come, all the family was there in the house, and it really helped him feel better about him passing on. And so I really think the community part helps a lot when dying. We must encourage them to let go of their fears, and I definitely agree. We need to help them feel as much comfort as possible with fear and forgiveness. I would definitely recommend this book to anybody. It is a really good book. It'll really open your eyes about death and how to care for others. And I really enjoyed it because, like I said, there's a lot of things in the book that I can relate to with personal experiences, like my grandfather. A lot of it relates to struggles we face with him. So I would definitely recommend it, but it was a very, very good book, and I definitely would want to read it again outside of class.